Hello and welcome to another BuildASoil product highlight. I'm especially excited about today's video because we have Robbie from Montana Grow. And recently we were able to spend some time at the New Mexico event, get to know each other a little more. Here at BuildASoil, we really vet the products, and anytime we get an opportunity to deal directly with the ownership, with the management, makes a big difference. Over a decade of doing business making soil, we've had a number of catastrophes with different suppliers. When you find a really clean product that makes a big difference, you want to talk about it. And the reason why we use this one is because of how clean it is, the abundance of this particular element, and we'll be talking about silicon today. So if you're into that kind of thing, pay attention. We're gonna go down a rabbit hole of silica, silicates, silicon, and we're gonna talk about the nuances. So Robbie.
Jeremy.
Thanks for hanging out, man.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and Montana Grow.
Let's see, I've been in Montana my whole life pretty much. I spent a little time in California. I was doing a documentary called Green Mining, and that's when we discovered this mine. It was an old geologist named Bob Wheeler. Put himself through school. He's an old Navy veteran. His family was familiar with these deposits because they had tapped into it when he was growing up, and they'd feed it to their chickens. They'd actually eat it. They would put it in their gardens and their vegetables, and you could just see. He showed me his garden, and I was just blown away. So he gave us some of this product, and I put it in my garden. I put it in my grow. It really convinced me that this was a great product. And in the long run, we ended up putting in some gardens and some grows. And my old partner and I decided to get into this mine. And so we started Montana Grow. Yep. And we would purchase the product from the old miner, Bob Wheeler. He was an old Navy guy that got his geology degree at the University of Montana. And he was very protective of the substance. And so for about 5-6 years, we had to buy the product from him, and prices varied. And at one point we decided to purchase the mine, and unfortunately Bob passed away and we lost him. The other gentleman, my partner, went on and did other things with hemp, and I'm now the founder of the product, the mine, Montana Grow. Oh. And Ignimbrite Minerals is the name of the mineral that we sell as Montana Grow.
And Ignimbrite actually means something.
Yeah, it was, I should know the gentleman's name, but he's out of New Zealand, and he termed it because of fire cloud rock. And what an Ignimbrite is, it's a volcanic explosion that takes place. It doesn't typically take place off the top. That stuff gets dispersed. It comes out the side. And in this particular case, this volcano action came out the side of a vent and filled a valley. And it's really hot, gaseous material that very pure. That's one of the things that Montana Grow is, a very pure, amorphous, non-crystalline source, which is pretty rare. Yep. Volcanoes are like fingerprints. They're all different, okay? So finding one that's actually, that you can harvest and is close to a road and is acknowledged.
The Earth is this battery of energy, and it's heat and pressure and tectonic plates and explosions of volcanoes and glaciers moving through and dragging. And so all of these processes over thousands of years have been lending itself to the creation of soil that's built the life that we're here enjoying. And so when I first started BuildASoil, I'm like, yeah, some plants and some soil. And I realized, oh my gosh, soil is everything. Civilizations are based on it. And so it became a lot more important to me in my entire life. And I've always known that near volcanic activity, near where there's lava rock, basalt, and volcanic tuff, there's typically really nutrient-dense food production, there's civilizations, and so there's a key in that biomimicry there. Part of the reason why we use these products is I can't really wait for a volcano to explode to start farming. We can't just move to the most fertile land anymore because it's been used.
So I sent some off to my father, who's a consummate tomato grower, and one day I get this call, and he goes, I want to talk to you about my tomato plants. And I was like, oh my goodness, you've all had that call from your dad, right? But he was really exuberant. He was happy. Good. He actually was so happy that he went and put some on his neighbor's tomato plant without telling him, because they were in a competition, and he messed with his neighbor all summer. Basically what happens, Jeremy, is if you take this material and you mix it with your regular regimen of fertilizer, you'll see a bigger and more healthy plant.
Early on, Clackamas Coot, I've mentioned him a couple times, Jim, he's one of the mentors here at BuildASoil, and he was from the very beginning talking about remineralization and the volcanic rock material versus the glacial material and some of that information. And he would also send me papers on silica. And this is one of them from like a decade ago that he sent me. This is from 2010. And it's called Silica, the Hidden Cost of Chemicals. I just pulled it out so you could go look up that article and read about it. Okay. And so that's why we're looking at it from potting soil side too, because heavy metals is one of the considerations that's popped up recently as far as testing for cleanliness of the final flower product. At a medical grow, it has to be under certain limitations depending on the state you live in. And that's good. They've monitored heavy metals across the board in food, and in tobacco. And depending on where you live and which state you're in, that may be of importance, it may not. But it's important to everyone as far as health. There's tons of information about silica and the mitigation of uptake of heavy metals. And it can be simple ones like copper is not even one we're concerned with, but there's soils that are excessive in copper and it causes problems. Montana Grow can mitigate that, or silicon can mitigate that. And Montana Grow is 76% silicon. I've also got some information in a book that I really like that Alan Atkinson turned me on to called Minerals for the Genetic Code. Besides adding it into the soil, which is great, there's more than a dozen applications. It just happens that BuildASoil is really into potting soil, so that's really what we're gonna focus on. But if you look at silicon, like it's very conductive material, it makes super tight bonds with things. And so when we think about energy flow, which I do wanna discuss, there's a reason why it's heavily used when we're talking about moving energy around. We talk about the light waves of the grow lights. We talk about the energy of the paramagnetic rock dust. Energy is a topic of agriculture. We're basically eating the sun, converting that energy into something that's useful to us. And when we look at the soil and we look at silicon, it has the ability to make 4 connections, if that makes sense. I'm not a chemist, but silicon is very, very special. I want to encourage you to do just a little bit of research so that you can have the same passion that we have when we talk about these things and adding them to the soil. You take a cocoa coir or peat moss, that's not soil. You add a little bit of compost, not quite there yet. You add a whole bunch of rock dust and you're starting to mimic what took thousands of years to produce in nature over weathering and a complex silicon cycle. And we get to just tap in. From a heavy metal perspective, from a testing perspective, we actually have a lot of data on this product, which is very important to BuildASoil. He mentioned eating it, and before I forget, I wanna read an excerpt in Minerals for the Genetic Code. Very interesting book by Charles Walters. It goes through pretty much everything on the periodic table of elements, and it gives you like the breakdown of like arsenic, for instance. Well, let's look at what it has to say about silicon, because I found this fascinating. When fingernails have ridges from front to back, that is a good indicator of low silicon levels. Chicken skin is high in silicon. The horsetail herb contains high levels of silicon. Silicon is used in connective tissues of the heart. About the only way to prevent aluminum buildup in the human body is through the action of silicon. Silicon can bind with the aluminum. It's got special binding properties to it. Diets high in silicon, along with magnesium and calcium, normally do not have high aluminum and are therefore excused from the scourge of Alzheimer's disease. Silicon is a natural aluminum deterrent. Okay, even though rock dusts have aluminum in them, the silica acts as a deterrent. And so nature's found these ways to have this duality, which is very, very interesting to me. Silicon is a natural aluminum deterrent. This mineral is high in the genetic sequencing that Richard Ulrey does, always dealing with structure and form. Silica is found in all of the tissues, especially the resistive tissues such as the skin, hair, nails, and tendons. It reinforces membranes throughout the body as well as the ligamentous tissue, arterial walls, throat walls, uterine lining, walls of the digestive tract, the spinal cord, and cerebral duramater, nails, and skin. Silica functions in the body by increasing vigor, energy, and strength, is found in all tissues, reinforces walls, linings, ligaments, membranes, nails, and hair, and increases alkalinity of the body, helps in transfer of nerve impulses, and aids in retention of electricity and body heat. I mean, this is ubiquitous within our body, and we always talk about how we're so much water, but we often don't think about the little bits of minerals that make up our body. So that was a lot of information in a short period of time. But I encourage you to look at many different sources, because within agriculture, silicon is viewed one way. Within the computer world, it's viewed this way. Within the health world, it's viewed this way. But you like across the board, ubiquitous, it's very, very important. And I think that's what BuildASoil, one of the things we really like to do is find those things that are almost unexplainably important and bring them to the forefront and make sure that we're talking about them. Because I know right away when we're looking at hydroponic versus soil grown, when you start to use silica in an environment that doesn't have any, you see a big difference. And in soil, the availability, the transport of nutrients, which we'll discuss, even if it's absent in the final product that we're after in particular parts, the transport of the nutrients that build that is very important, and I want to discuss some of that. So that's the human side. I want to also read really briefly this article, which I encourage you to look up, Silica, the Hidden Cost of Chemicals. I'm not going to go too far. If you Google this, it'll pop up right away, and there is just so much information about abiotic stress and disease and pest resistant. The intro to this, it's funny, I pulled it up on my computer and he recognized it from across the office like, oh, that's a good article. It's the one Coot sent me over a decade ago, and that's why I want to just read the intro. A major mineral is missing in many soils, and most soil tests do not even monitor its presence. This mineral can increase stress resistance, boost photosynthesis and chlorophyll content, improve drought resistance, salt tolerance, and soil fertility, and prevent lodging. It can also reduce insect pressure, frost damage, and destructive disease while lowering irrigation rates, neutralizing heavy metal toxicity, and countering the negative effects of excess sodium. If I were to tell you that this same missing mineral can increase root growth, boost yield, and enhance crop quality, you could well ask, how could we have overlooked something so important? And this is just the beginning. The next talks about poverty and a sea of abundance, and I've got some important things to talk about as far as the sequencing of the nutrients that I wanted to share, the differences in silicic acid and silicon and all that, but we'll get there. First, I want to discuss this. You can look up this article, Hugh Lovell, the biochemical sequence. But the biochemical sequence of nutrition in plants, you see kind of some periodic elements on here from the table. They're numbered in order here. And so boron is first. And so boron, if you look at the biomechanical sequence, it begins with boron, which activates silicon, which carries all other nutrients, starting with calcium, which binds nitrogen to form amino acids, DNA, and cell division. Amino acids form proteins such as chlorophyll and tag trace elements, especially magnesium, phosphorus to carbon to form sugars to where potassium carries them. This is the basis of plant growth. This organization from the beginning is like, instead of saying everything's in the soil, there still is a beginning point where if it's not there, the boron's not there, it's not going to get to the silica, it's not going to get to the calcium, and not just quantity of availability, it's access to that's important. And in soil with great biology, you should have access to. But if it's not there to begin with, the biology can't do its job. It's like trying to build a house, you got all the wood but no nails. When we look at the job of silicon in the soil, we know that the entire Earth's crust is made of it. And it's in plants and they wouldn't know how. Like, does it drink glass? Does it move this rock into its leaf, and how is that even possible? Well, that's where it comes to silicic acid, and that is caused by weathering of the silicon, which is pure, eventually combining with different oxygens and making a weak acid, silicic acid, that's plant available. And they're still doing research about whether it's transport genes or whether it's just moved through the water. And all we do know is that there's a complex biological reaction that happens. Silicon is converted into weathered, more available plant sources, and that plant available silicon is now utilized. And when we understand what BuildASoil does, you'll realize lots of our testing was done on how do we make calcium more available on our potting soil. Calcium, calcium, calcium. It's like the biggest cation. It's got all this weight that comes to it when you look at soil and soil testing and how important it is to health of the plant. Well, it's a huge material. Calcium's hard to move around for the plant. And so when you look at this ladder, so to speak, the way it was described is boron might be the first rung. But if you skip silicon, calcium is way up. And so you literally have to be a rock climber to jump to that next rung or pull yourself up. And so what we want to do is make it easy for the plant, not expending all that energy. And so if we have boron, then we have silicon, then we have calcium, now the plant can start to do its job. And if you follow the order, boron, silicon, calcium to nitrogen. And so when we have living soil and it's brand new, freshly mixed, and some of that stuff may not be quite as available, it's important that we consider that. So this material, if you look, instead of just waiting for it to happen, it's been crushed into some fines. And there's some for now, some for later. And when it's that much surface area of a small material and it's put into a potting soil, now the biology can do its job much faster. And so we have a much better chance of making available to our plant the silicon, the silicic acid, that can now combine and help, improve phosphorus uptake 40 to 60% from what we're adding. And we don't want to add all these phosphorus sources. A lot of times they're really dirty. So if there's one thing you pick up from today, besides Montana Grow being a very clean, available source of silicon, it's that silicon is of paramount importance to taking calcium, which is huge when it comes to the rest of what we do here. And that's not even before we get into like the disease, like powdery mildew. When you look at it, anytime that the powdery mildew anchors into the leaf and literally like pierces into the plant, massive amounts of silica rush to that site to stiffen up the cell walls and stop that infection from occurring. And if you don't have copious amounts of that in the soil, then it can't just translocate it as fast as it need be. And there's an interaction with the plants where it sends enzymes to the soil that call for it and allow it to be made into silicic acid. I'm not going to pretend to understand that, but I do know nature knows how it's done, and it's pretty powerful. So before I go any further, how do you feel about all the stuff I shared? I know that I come from a different background. You've been running the mine, and so we kind of met in the middle and agreed on a lot of things.
Yeah, and your concept on living soil is why I'm here. I deal with a lot of other distributors, fertilizer mixers, but none of them really put together the whole scenario and look at it from all the sides. And watching your YouTube channel, I was very intrigued. You do a very good job. So I'm honored to be here, one, and two, I've learned with you just in the last day and a half, and it's confusing. There's a lot of marketing going on out there, and
Yeah.
really, that's why I honestly trust your view. You have a living soil. That's what I think, and we get behind the most is that's where the best product comes from.
Yep.
You know, living soil, and to not throw away your soil, to take care of it and repurpose it. That's a good practice, and I think we're a very good component of that.
Silicon's important. I want to talk about silicon, silica. Silica is what you're often going to be heard as the term. Silica is going to be like silicon dioxide is what that's referring to. And there's two oxygen, the dioxide, attached to it. In nature, you're not going to find silicon just hanging out. Si is silicon. SiO2 is silicon dioxide. SiO4 or OH4 is when you get into the silicic acid. From the very basic, silicon is super specific, and that is the individual element which you're not really going to see. Silicates, instead of just silicate, which is the one we talked about, silicon dioxide, and I could be getting some of this wrong, but I want you to explain why there's differences. Silicates represent the interaction, because I told you there's 4 bonding sites on pure silicon. It can bind with things to make what are called silicates. You've heard of potassium silicate? That's silicon and potassium, and it's bound together very tightly. And so when we're trying to discuss how to use these things, a lot of times the water-soluble ones, that's where a lot of weird chemistry gets involved. And the reason why we're not super excited about that is they use chemicals to extract. They have to be at crazy pHs to keep them plant available, as opposed to binding in these other chemicals. And so foregoing all of that, when we have the way nature did it, and we happen to have found a mine that, I mean, look at this is insane. I'm sure he'll let me show this. The level, like when we look at cadmium, there's like no cadmium, there's no arsenic, there's very, 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 very low amounts. And so this is difficult to find. You can just go to mines and start buying stuff. And the remineralization movement just literally said, go to wherever they're crushing gravel around you and buy it and put that dust in your soil. And most of the time that's really good information, but if it happened to be for your medical grow and you're held accountable to heavy metals, it could be a disaster waiting to happen. So we really vet everything that we use. And when we know it's this clean, it really helps us add lots of it to receive the benefit without fearing that this other side. And a lot of times in organics, what you're adding has 2 or 3 other things, and you've got to deal with the balance of that, right? So another thing that I wanted to mention from heavy metal, which I thought was incredible, there's another product out there that has been patented a process to bind silica with a phosphorus. And I didn't bring it on board because there was some heavy metals, depending on the source of the phosphorus, to use this technology that was more elevated than what I was experienced with. And I was shy of that. I don't want any of our customers to have any issues. I also know that silica mitigates the uptake. I've got this report, which, you know, it's just a basic printout, but essentially all I'm going to be showing you is that everything passed here in heavy metals, and this was flour from a cannabis plant. And they used this material that, in my opinion, had more of cadmium than should be allowed to be used. And none of it was taken up by the plant because it was bonded to the Montana grow. And so I'm not gonna guarantee that using Montana grow is gonna solve all your problems as far as if you have a really bad contamination, but it'd be the first thing that I'd be looking at, along with biological ways of accumulating and removing, utilizing silica. So we have started putting this into our craft blend. It's in all of our potting soils. And we actually have a new potting soil called Ultra Clean that is tested at the lowest rates of heavy metals we've ever been able to produce. And it's only got 7 ingredients, and this is one of them. And we use copious amounts of it to make sure that if the grower were to add something, unbeknownst to them in the future, this could help mitigate that uptake and give all of the energy benefits we were talking about. I think that's a lot of the papers that I really wanted to cover, talking about heavy metals, talking about how it binds and how it's an important part of calcium and mobilization. But then let's talk about the different materials. Because you can source lots of different ways, right? And if you live in another part of the world, you can't just buy Montana grow. I encourage you to look at other sources that are available to you. Clackamas Coote taught me that glacial rock dust and basalt was really good. Eventually he preferred basalt. Basalt is a lava flow. Basalt actually encapsulates this over the top of it. And this is so unique because normally when you're discussing remineralization, it's like granite, basalt, glacial, it's the standards. But very rare can you find a volcanic ash like this. When you look at the actual structure, I'm not sure if we brought an image. There's an image. It's very unique in its structure. It's not crystalline, and because of that, it makes a very unique texture. And one of the things we're after in potting soil, besides just silicon being great, is we want to build a soil texture that's very conducive for plant growth. And that takes a balance of cation exchange, that takes a balance of absorbing and holding moisture. as well as what it does to interact with the overall elements in the soil. And this fits the bill across the board. So it does something for us in every area. We could just add sand, like a lot of soil companies do, but that is a crystalline source. Like sand, a lot of times when you look at it, it looks more like a crystal. It's like, it's not the same as what this, it's like softer, it's more plant available. I'm getting a little bit weird on the texture of it, but the sand doesn't impart the same. Here's the actual rock that is mine, and when it's clean and it has all the stuff we're after, and it's got special characteristics that improve the texture of our soil, to me that's really, really good. So we add basalt and we add Montana Grow, and he eats it. Paramount importance to the human gut as well, and that's a big bonus. Anytime BuildASoil can say, hey, some for you, some for me. Like we love talking about coconut and aloe and things that are of human benefit. Minerals are super important to us too. A lot of times we want the plants to eat the minerals, and then we can eat the plants.
It's been a misperceived mineral. I mean, it wasn't recognized by APCO until what, 2013, I believe?
Yeah, and APCO is the one that says like, hey, these are the standard nutrients that you need for a crop to survive, basically, and these are the levels of which should be there.
Yeah, and I'm very impressed with your collection of books. I mean, when I first got there, I said, I bet none of those books up there have silicon in them, and Jeremy pulled out at least 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Understanding it is half of it. You got to understand too that a healthy plant will get on to reproduction quicker, and all the other stuff that's in there all builds towards that, and it allows it to reach its full potential. So it focuses on what it's supposed to be doing instead of fighting off frost or insect invasion.
I mentioned AgSil 16H. We carry the product. That's like for foliar spray to prevent powdery mildew, which is great, but it's extracted with potassium hydroxide. It's not approved for organic use unless you've got a proven reason, and it's crazy alkaline. And it's manufactured in a way that's not as environmentally friendly, where this is just, it's made by nature. Then there's wollastonite, calcium silicate, and the mines have been shutting down. I can't buy as much of it. It's very alkaline producing in small amounts in the soil, and it may not be the exact ratio. I love gypsum. I love having access to regular rock dust and high silica amounts. And so we've been talking about maybe mixing a few of those together and coming up with something. But they're also, these mines, depending on where you go, can be high in heavy metals, or it can be high in aluminum that's not bound because of the percentage of silica, and it makes problems. There's companies like azomite, which we stopped carrying a while ago. They talk about like A to Z or whatever, and I just feel like there's better minerals. And so as we identify those, I want to share them with you, and I encourage you to give me feedback. So if you've been using a silica product and you really like it, let's talk about it, and let's talk about why. Because a lot of people are selling silicic acid in very small amounts that they say is the only way plants can uptake it, and that's what you should buy. And it's gonna increase your yield, and they're hundreds of dollars per bottle. I don't believe that's true in soil whatsoever, and you get a phenomenal response from having the material in there, allowing the biology of nature to do what it's done for a long time. A lot of the ones that you're gonna see that have excessive prices on them and are marketed as an available silica, what they call PAS, plant available silica. I feel like when we're not in living soil, it's basically just marketing, and I don't want you to be confused by that and be led astray. We have more soil, more biology, more rock dust than usual, so that if the plant needs to speed up its process, it has an abundance of its working material so that it can do that. It's kind of like 3D printing through nature. You have to have all of the colors, all of the elements in there, or you can't print from the soil what you're trying to build. But nature's so smart that it'll still try and do it. It'll just be missing very important pieces of it, and it'll still look like a similar structure. Plants can live without it, and that's why the APCO avoided saying it was a plant nutrient that was required for a long time. If the plant needs it, it's going to use it, and when it has an adverse event, like the lights were left on too intense or something, or over-fertilization, or powdery mildew, or a stress event, it will call for silica, and it will start mobilizing it immediately. And so plant available silica, when it's in abundance, when the plant wants it, it fulfills the buffet aspect of what BuildASoil talks about. Instead of just saying, hey, we have this IV and we know exactly what you need, and your stomach and mouth and everything just stops working, we want to encourage the entire system to work. That's how living soil works. So we fill the buffet, and using that buffet theme, we know that, hey, like the lobster and crab's gonna go quick. You have to fill it up a lot, where maybe the old stale, cookies at the end might be there the whole time. And so if we put it in the soil, I'm very, very confident if your plant needs it, it's going to make a call for it. The enzymes will do their job, and you're going to have plant available silicon.
I'd like to hit on the fact that what we're saying now is grow more using less. And that's really going into the times that we're doing, and this goes along with your living soil. Why keep recreating your soil? It's an expense. So what grow more using less means is that the silicon in our product will be in the root zone, and it'll help regulate the uptake of phosphates and nitrogens and the other important nutrients. And it'll keep them from running off and leaching, okay? And so it'll hold them in the root zone. And basically, silicon is a transporter gene, and it'll help, strengthens the stalks from roots to shoots. And that's where, when the plant needs something, if it's got a really good cardiovascular system, like it's able to move things up and down, that's where this comes in, really handy. And so having it in the root zone when the plant needs it, that to me is one of the bigger benefits that we have with Montana Grow. Yeah.
Yep. And when you look at our plants, right, in living soil, I think that once you've done it for a while, you can notice a perky, healthy plant when it's got this, what they call turgor. It's reaching for the light. You can see them just tracking the sun. And when you're talking about building a solar panel like a leaf, if you have good rigidity and turgor and you can face exactly the direction with the right structure, that's how you obtain the most structure that can receive all of the light to do its job. So when you have the silica, you can actually get that structure. And there's interchange in there from chlorophyll to silica as the leaf ages. Where in humans, silica goes down, I believe when plants get older, silica goes up. And so as the plant matures and it's full of silica and it can do its job at peak production, and we know that boron, silica, calcium, and we're trying to transport this difficult to move material, you can see how it fits the BuildASoil model. We're trying to lower the energy required for things to do their job. We're trying to limit the amount of crap that we apply to the soil just to get a result, which means that we need to make it more energy efficient. And I mean, everything I do, like I study jiu-jitsu, I talk about that all the time. It's literally just about doing something as efficient as possible without wasting any energy. And I'd imagine I'll spend the rest of my life getting better at it because it's so fascinating to me. Montana Grow works really well. In fact, in our Ultra Clean, we're adding 100 pounds per cubic yard. It's a lot. It's more rock dust than we've added in the past. And I'm really excited about it. So what would you recommend? Let's say they grab a bag of Montana Grow. They're excited about it. They know it's got no heavy metals. It's got the silicon thereafter. What should they expect? How should they use it?
When you put your plant, you put in about half a cup of Montana Grow in the root zone. Okay. Yeah, you just take this and just spread it in the root zone. Okay.
I encourage you to try this one. It made a difference for us. That's why we put it in our potting soil. And now that you know how much effort we put into every single ingredient that goes in our soil, I think you'll be right there with me in feeling the power of some of this stuff. And when it comes full circle, and your mentor has been sending you articles for decades on silica, when Dr. Faust made a product with this humic acid because he believed in it so much, and I tapped into that before it even existed, and then a decade later you show up. We're getting totes of the material and we're mixing it by the truckload. We have it available in little containers, and we're gonna be talking about different textures. We've got a bucket down here, which I'll show you real quick. This is actually how it comes out before it's screened in that fine powder. And we're discussing mixing this in our soil because it gives us a gradient in textures. There's actually the small little, looks like pumice, and it's very similar to pumice. It doesn't act the exact same. It's gonna provide a little bit different type of benefit. We're gonna be using lots of this material. We'll be discussing it for years to come. And so we'll probably, especially if you guys wanna see it, we'll do another episode in the future, I'm sure, where we go maybe a little bit further down the silicon rabbit hole. It's a really weird one. There's some articles you can research about how silicon acts different than most other elements. And I encourage you to go down that rabbit hole, research a little bit. If you find something unique and seriously interesting, post it up in here. If you've followed biodynamic farming, you know that they foliar spray silica via horsetail, and they make biodynamic preparations, and it's been gone on before the history of the science of why, and you can actually interpret and read his articles from Rudolf Steiner on the reasons why the energy flow of the earth and why silica is so important to that, and why they were using it via horsetail even back then. So full circle, this connects all the dots for BuildASoil. If you're in living soil, you just put it in the root zone like he was talking about. I add 100 pounds per cubic yard, which might be a little excessive, but you can't overdo it. I really like adding it because it makes a good structure and it makes it turn more into real soil, in my opinion. It's in our BuildASoil Light, it's in our 3.0, and it's in our craft blend. And instead of it just hiding in there, I want people to know that we use these ingredients for really specific purposes. And the textures are important too, but there's different ones. I mentioned the granule. He went and grabbed some. Why would someone use this granule?
This would be more for topical application, or say your grandma doesn't want to deal with dust and she's got plants or vegetables. And what we do is we granulate that, and it's just kind of an evolution.
Yeah, and so this is just bound with a material that makes it stick together.
Yeah, it's bound with pine juice. Actually, this has
cool.
72% silicon because of the 4% that we add of the, and that acts as a little bit, it helps, start the microbial action. Yep. So I won't eat this one though. It doesn't taste as good.
Yeah, it's got the pine dust in it. So when you hear the percentages, a lot of times you're gonna see products out there, they're gonna say, this is like a silica form. And I mean, it could be sand, right? And that doesn't mean it's available to the plant. And that doesn't also mean that, hey, when it's in a liquid form, that's the same as nature does it. It's very, very different. And it can be laden in heavy metals. In fact, there was a big debacle about potassium silicate and heavy metals and lead, and then another manufacturer was posting all these silicic acid companies and their heavy metal reports, and they were terrible. But it wasn't because they were that bad, it was just to show you that, hey, like, these are everywhere, and you shouldn't be maybe as scared of these if you understand them. But over here, it's really not an issue at all, which I really like.
If you slip up, that's how I found it. It was an insurance policy for poor growing techniques and partners, you know.
Now, not every plant is said to be as in demand of silica versus others, but I think they all use it in some way because we're talking about transport of nutrients, many different things other than just how much ends up in the final tissue. This is very loosely, it's not like a rock, it's just the same fine powder that's been prilled together so that you can put it in a machine that spreads it like this around a golf course without literally making a cloud of smoke behind it.
The dust is, this product is amorphous non-crystalline, and you don't want to breathe dust anyways, but if you do get some of this, it will not cause silicosis.
No.
Okay? And that's a big thing when you start talking about other sources.
Yeah, I forgot about silicosis. I'm so comfortable with silica. A lot of people hear the word and they go, oh, isn't that bad for your lungs? I've heard about that, right? That was because people were breathing crystalline silica, and it's usually because it's been calcined or heated to make it act in certain ways, and so that dust is very, very different. There's certain types of diatomaceous earth that have been heated to act a certain way, and they're very crystalline in structure and dangerous. Other diatomaceous earth might be more amorphous and very, very low in the crystalline side. So when it comes to your health, you have to know what you're dealing with. When it comes to Montana Grow, we already know that one's safe, so we've done the research for you.
The other thing too that we can touch on is this really plays well with other substances, okay? And so it has this neutrality that doesn't spike. It kind of calms the other ingredients down. And so that's another benefit that you don't get with other sources of soil.
Well, it's interesting too because a lot of times the reason why we think, like in potting soil, cation exchange is proven to not be that important. In agronomic soil, super important. That's the magnetic ability to hold nutrients, cation exchange capacity. The higher, the more nutrients it can hold. The lower, the less nutrients it can hold. But that's talking about the magnetic ability to hold it. When we're talking about silica, it is a lower cation exchange, but what it does is the silica in there, through weatherization in your organic soil, will now start to grab onto other elements and create a tight bond and not leach out of the soil. It's different than cation exchange, but it's still making silicates in your soil that the plant can use. And so when he mentioned phosphorus uptake and helping that, there's studies you can research that say, hey, 40 to 60% increase in the efficient use of phosphorus when you're using silica with it. So remember those things. Silica, it's not like it's just magnetically holding it all, but we can't grow in straight clay. So high cation exchange is one way to hold nutrients, but absorption versus just adsorption. Adsorption is the cation exchange. This absorbs it like a sponge and can hold on to things and can make silicate compounds. And so many ways to use it. You mentioned the stress and the tolerance side of it. If you live somewhere like I do where the Colorado, the sun's intense, it's not very humid, the wind beats them, you're gonna notice a significant difference in your side-by-side test. If you've got a perfect environment, the plant may not require as much silica that round, and you may not see as dramatic of a stress test. I don't like to make claims. I'm not gonna say it's gonna double your yield or anything like that, but he mentioned when you try this, using what you normally use, and I think you'll find extreme benefit to that because it's gonna more efficiently use it. That's why we add it to the craft blend, and that's why we add it to our soils. Now, when we look at that, I mean, all the way down here, like, let's see what we've got. There's even more you could test for, but we've got like zirconium and vanadium and all these different elements that are part of a rock dust. A lot of times you're after that, but we can't straight get it. So when we use kelp meal in soil, it comes with some arsenic. And it's been proven safe for a long time, but a lot of guys are scared to add a lot of it. Where this, it's different. If you had too much kelp meal, major problems, excesses and hormones and all sorts of things. But growers for a long time used green sand, right? We never carried green sand here. There was a certain mine that was better than others, but the reason why growers used green sand, it was silica, right? But it had potassium, and that's why they thought the benefit was there. I think silica was probably a bigger part of it, but this one in particular, if you look, potassium has 5% potassium. So this will make some potassium silicates right there in your soil, and it will be available for use, and it's not potassium hydroxide, liquid extracted in a barrel at like 14 pH. It's totally natural. It's much easier to use. But then you notice there's calcium, there's magnesium, there's manganese, there's molybdenum. All of these are of importance. And Dr. Faust talked about the lichen on the lava rock and how quickly that can all happen. The rock was the key to that. And so we just keep coming back to this. Coot had me watch a video. You should look it up. It was about basalt, and it was about rock dust, and it was about the creation and geology of our Earth, and some of the first amino acids that begat life started to begin with some of the initial breakdown of the energy of the Earth and these rock dust materials. So like, you could go all the way down and like start to talk about the foundation of life when it comes to silicon, rock dust, and building soil. And that's really why we had you down here today, is because that's what we do. We're BuildASoil.
Yep, living soil, that's what it's about. I really appreciate you having me, and I'm a big fan of BuildASoil. And
it's been really good having you out here tonight.
Yeah, thank
I'm
you
even
very
more
much.
excited about
Appreciate it, yeah.
using the material, and I hope that you guys have great questions for us. Robbie's super easy to access, so if there's something I can't answer, I'll call out to him and we'll discuss it. As always, put questions in here. Ask questions to Robbie. Tell your friends about this. If you want to discuss silicon, silicic acid, those products, I'm all ears. I want to talk about it here below in the comments. Thank you so much. This has been another BuildASoil product highlight. I hope that you appreciate all this stuff. I hope it helps in your garden. Like always, subscribe, like, put some comments in here, tell your buddies, and I'll see you on the next episode.